Thanks for joining me on this week's 172nd Air Wing video. Up for review today are a pair of Phantoms. So to round out Phantom May in commemoration of 65 years of operations and counting, we have two F4s up for review, both of them from HobbyMaster. The one on the left is the F4H-1, which first deployed aboard USS Forrestal back in 1961. And on the right, we have the Hellenic Air Force F4E AUP, AUP standing for Avionics Upgrade Program. So we have, between these two Phantom models, 39 years of time and technological progress between these two. We've gone from the AIM-7 right here, which is so early on this iteration of F4H-1 that it wasn't even called the AIM-7 yet. It was called the AAM-N-3. We hadn't even nailed down the Unified Service Designation System. That's how far back that model F4 goes back to. The one on the right here is so advanced in avionics that it has 4th generation radar, missile defense systems here, updated all aspect AIM-9 heat seekers, and the AIM-120 autonomous air-to-air AMRAAM. So this is, Fox 3 technology where the missile can guide itself to the target. And we have right here at the very, very beginning, Fox 1 radar technology where the aircraft has to paint the target to help guide the missile. And we have rear aspect 3G limitation AIM-9B sidewinders. Once again, I don't even think they were calling these AIM-9Bs at the time. That's how early this F4 in VF-74 colors goes back to. Now, the official name of the Phantom on the left is the F4H-1. However, for consistency of designation, I'm going to call it what Robert McNamara ordered it to be called, which is the F4B. So it really says something about a design when an aircraft that first went into service in the beginning months of the John F. Kennedy administration is still, at the time of this video in 2023, in frontline active duty service with 4 air forces across the globe. One of which is, of course, as pictured, the Hellenic Air Force with the F4E AUP. The Turkish Air Force operates the F4E 2020 Terminator, which I would have loved to get into today's video. However, the last release HobbyMaster has done of Turkish Air Force F4Es was quite some time ago, and since then the prices on those F4 models are, well, it's beyond my budget, if nothing else. So unfortunately, we will have to wait some time before I can get one of those on the channel. So at this point, the Greek Air Force wins by nomination of actually being attainable. So you have the Turkish Air Force flying the F4E, the Greek Air Force flying the F4E. The South Koreans still fly them, although as I understand it at this time, they are making preparations to replace theirs with the F-35. And the Islamic Republic of Iran still flies the 1970 specification F4s that were purchased when it was the Imperial Iranian government that was friendly to the US and headed by Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, which is something that I've covered in my previous F4E IRIAF review that you can check out that I released earlier this year. So if you want to know more about that Phantom, you can certainly look at that model review for some more background. So yeah, 4 countries flying these right now, and 3 of them have upgraded their aircraft to modern specification. So we will talk a little bit more about that. But before we get into the fun stuff and how we've gone from early 3rd generation technology on the left to 4th generation technology on the right in the same airplane, no less, let's get into the history of this guy and how it all started. So today, at the time of publication, this will mark the 65th anniversary of the F4's introduction. I would have loved to have gotten this uploaded on Saturday morning, but just the way the logistics of doing this video, it didn't quite line up. So we can't say it was 65 years to the day, but I suppose you all will hopefully forgive me for the logistical misalignment there and taking an extra day to get this video out to you. So the story starts in 1954, which is when McDonnell Douglas submitted a development proposal to the U.S. Navy for what was then called the F4H-G. It was made to be a dedicated air-to-ground aircraft, which would take lessons and technology learned from the F4H Demon project, as well as the U.S. Air Force's F-101 Voodoo, and combine them into a new fleet attack aircraft for the U.S. Navy. Some discussions between McDonnell Douglas and the U.S. Navy ensued throughout 1954 and early 1955. In July of 1955, a new set of specifications were published. So the original Westinghouse J65 engines were ditched and replaced with the General Electric J79, which at the time was brand new technology. The weapons were also changed. The 20mm cannons originally specified were removed, and in their place, the AAM-N-6 Sparrow 3 radar-guided missile was substituted. And a top speed of Mach 2 was also mentioned in these updated requirements, which led to the development of the variable intakes that you see here, where the inside portion here, basically the air data computer sends a signal to this part here. This part here folds inward, something like the cover of a book when you flip it over. and then that helps block the airflow going into the intake at high Mach speeds, which slows down the air before it goes down to J79s for ingestion and combustion. If the airspeed of the air is too fast when it hits the jet engine, you're going to get problems with compressor stalls, which are, as those of you who have watched Top Gun, the first movie, know, are not good things to have in a combat airplane. So the other changes that were made to the design were the implementation of the 23-degree angle of the anhedral for the horizontal stabilizer and the 12-degree dihedral for the wingtips. And these parts were added in order to enhance the stability of the aircraft. This was done to minimize the possibility of pitch up, which was an aerodynamic problem that plagued the F-101 Voodoo series all the way up until that McDonnell Douglas aircraft's retirement in the 1980s. So in drawing from lessons learned on that, the tailplane of the F4 was angled into its distinctive 23-degree configuration that you see here. This was also changed over time because, as you notice in the model, this is a flat edge right here. This was modified in the 1960s to have an upturned integrated slat, which enhanced the effectiveness of the horizontal stabilizer here, and you can see that modeled on the F4E. It's a bit out of camera frame here, but if you go back through the intro footage, you'll see that the leading edge of the horizontal stabilizer has that trough there, that trough, and it helps to enhance the effectiveness of that aerodynamic control at low air speeds, which is another advantage of the F4E versus the earlier variants that you see right here in the F4H-1. So the first flight of the F4 took place, originally it was planned for February of 1957, but it was pushed back and rescheduled 4 times. As many of you may have noticed with the F-35 program, often with complicated weapon systems, delays tend to impact when that first flight happens, and things were no different with this, at the time, leading edge project. So the first flight happened on May 27th, 1958, 65 years ago. That's something to say about a design when it's been around that long, that a pilot who joined the U.S. military in the year this aircraft was introduced would have long since retired from all flying this year. So in the United States at this time, there is a rule where if you turn 65, it doesn't matter what kind of pilot you are. For medical reasons, you forfeit your ability to fly going further. So that says something when a design like this is still flying, when many of the pilots who had been there when it first started have long since retired. So after the fleet escort training and suitability trials in the 1960s with the U.S. Navy, the F4H-1 deployed aboard the then brand new USS Forrestal in November 1961. And then that deployment was actually the first time that the F4H-1 Phantom II was used in an operational capacity. And it was this squadron, VF-74, which took the F4 Phantom on its first cruise, many of which, the footage of which you have just seen earlier in the introductory segment. So this is the first HobbyMaster model that you see on the left, and that is why you see the color scheme there. And you also have, at the time, Commander Julian Lake, and then you have Lieutenant Gallatin here as the radar intercept officer. Julian Lake would go on to do many major things. He would go on to flag rank in the U.S. Navy after commanding VF-74 on the Phantom's very first introductory mission. And that was a rather important milestone for the aircraft, because at that time it was the fastest and most advanced aircraft that the U.S. had in its inventory. So certainly an amazing opportunity for him to have commanded the very first squadron. And as such, when Julian Lake would later give an interview to discuss his time with VF-74, he mentioned that of all the things he did, getting the F4 into combat service for the first time was one of the highlights of his career. And it's certainly a highlight in the history of an airplane that's been in service as long as this. And on that note, well, it's a good point to talk about the other Phantom in the photo, or should I say video here. So the Hellenic Air Force adopted the F4E after a negotiation with the United States to purchase a batch of them in the 1970s. So in 1971, the Peace Icarus program was started. And usually when the U.S. military sells weapons systems to another country, they generally call it a certain designation. So ironically, maybe not ironically, I'm not sure why, but somehow the State Department gets involved and they title the aircraft purchase program some variation of peace, and then they put a name in. So when they sold F4s to the Egyptian Air Force, it was called Peace Pharaoh. When they sold F4s in this case to the Hellenic Air Force, it was called Peace Icarus, because of course the ancient legend of Icarus and flying toward the sun comes from Greece. So let it be known that the State Department doesn't appear to have issues with humor. So the contract included 36 F4Es, and they were delivered from March 1974 onward from U.S. Air Force stocks. So another order of 18 F4Es and 8 reconnaissance F4Es was placed in 1976. And as you notice here, the F4E is still in service with the Hellenic Air Force to this day, serving primarily in an air-to-ground operational mission, but also encompassing offensive counter-air, defensive counter-air, as well as some battlefield surveillance and reconnaissance. So definitely a multi-role airplane, which is kind of interesting because this is a multi-role airplane that's been operational since the first few months of John F. Kennedy's administration. So in 1997, the Peace Icarus 2000 program, almost said 2020 there, Peace Icarus 2000 program was started. The Greek government began negotiations with EADS of Germany to conduct the AUP, or Avionics Upgrade Program. What this did is it basically took all of the old school cable and 1970s era analog computers and technology, yanked all of that out of the F4 Phantom's frame, and replaced it with a military NATO specification IEEE 1333 data bus, the APG 65 radar, and the other addition of various avionics, allowing the carriage of a targeting pod on the left front station here, like a modern Lightning, which you might see on an F-16 or an F-15. It also featured upgrades to the internal computers, the air data computer, the GPS navigation, identification friend or foe. The cockpit configuration was updated to a HOTUS modern setup. The wide-angle HUD was also installed, and the radar warning and defensive avionics were upgraded. So this particular model is of serial number 1534, Air Force serial 721534. This aircraft was updated to AUP specification in 2009. And the Greek Air Force brought it to the Royal International Air Tattoo, or RIAT Air Show, in 2017. And as I understand it, at the time of this video, they also plan to bring a pair of F4Es back to the 2023 RIAT show as well. So that's going to be cool to see. Nothing like seeing an F4 in high definition. And it's just too bad we didn't really have that technology back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s to capture these birds in their original day, you know. So a comparison like this, where you have the 1960s version and the 2020s version side by side, would be of course unrealistic in real life unless you had a time machine. But thankfully, due to the efforts of HobbyMaster and some key people, we're able to make that comparison right here, if a little bit in a smaller scale. So this is a great point to pivot to the models. So some of the differences between the F4s, you'll notice the noses are different. That's because we have the APG-120 original radar built in here. Remember that the first specification for the F4H-1 omitted the 20mm cannons. Over here, we see that that decision has definitely been reversed in style, because a 20mm Gatling gun is installed in this section of the nose, and the barrel comes down here. And as you can see, HobbyMaster has accurately captured the barrel shroud, which on Greek Hellenic Air Force F4Es is painted a reflective silver color. I presume that's to help clean up the gun muzzle gases somewhat easier. We also see here that HobbyMaster has modeled the missiles, the original AAM-N-3 Sparrow 3s, and the AIM-9Bs, as mentioned, are here. The AIM-9Ls, the all-aspect ones, as well as the AIM-120 Fox 3 AMRAAM missiles are equipped on this display configuration. We have all 4 installed. Would have been nice if HobbyMaster had an option for an air-to-ground payload with maybe a JDAM or an LGB or 2 on each of the rails with a lightning targeting pod here. That would have been pretty cool to see. HobbyMaster has also accurately rendered the ANALE 165 defensive suite that the AUP program installed on these F4s. So you have an antenna here underneath the landing gear on the nose, one on each side of the intakes, one here and one here. And then there's supposed to be one in the very back at the bottom of the cover for the drag chute, which unfortunately HobbyMaster forgot to model on that. So I may take some, just take a little drop of Tamiya filler and put one on there just to, you know, and take some filler, put it back there just to make a little teardrop, and then paint it black so it completes the antenna configuration. Because once you see it in the actual airplane, it's kind of a glaring omission. And speaking of omissions on this one, there's no quote-unquote bird slicer IFF antennas. There should be a panel here which features 4 antennas, and that's for the updated IFF system that was installed on the AUP Phantoms. Unfortunately, it is not modeled on this F4, and that's an unfortunate miss, because I think if they had gotten that right, along with getting the aft radar warning receiver antenna correct, it would have been a really amazing model. But as is, I'm not necessarily complaining. I think it's good to have a plain Jane Greek F4E in the mix, and you know, I think it would look really nice, because I got some plans on maybe doing some aggressive weathering on it, because it looks like the Greeks keep their F4s properly dirty and used, and I would like this one to look that way. I also have the God of War release that the HobbyMaster released as well, along with this one a couple years back, so I may keep that one pristine and then just dirty this one up to make it look more realistic. So you'll also notice here on this, the differences between these two. You've got the bumps here containing the actuators for the leading edge slats on the inner parts of the wing. On the F4H-1, you see here in silver, this is the boundary layer control slats, which come down and are blown by compressed air coming from the J79 compressor. So hot air blows from a little vent right here, comes over the slats, and then that helps enable low speed maneuverability when you are landing that on the carrier. By enabling the built-in leading edge slats, it helps the F4E's turn rate, which in combination with the modified horizontal stabilator, as I mentioned earlier, gets a better sustained and instantaneous horizontal turn rate, which happens to be a very good thing if you're dogfighting agile, itty-bitty little MiG fighters. So, certainly, I think these are good models to have. If you're somebody that's a fan of the F4 in all its incarnations, I think these two are great to add, just because this way you have the encompassment of the initial F4, which was first trialed and put into service, in this case here on the left, and then the last iteration of the F4E, which is still in service to this day. So as a list of things that the F4 has outlasted in its lengthy service history, put together a small list of things that the F4 has out longevity, as it were. So the F4 Phantom has outlasted the Soviet Union, the Beatles, 11 presidential terms, and still counting, because the F4 has not been fully retired yet. So we'll see. That counter might go up a little bit in the coming years. It outlasted the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, who recently passed away on that score. It outlasted James Bond, which I was surprised to see. But yeah, basically, Dr. No came out a year after Julian Lake took Fighting Squadron 74 out on USS Forrestal. So the entirety of the James Bond franchise has happened within the F4 service term. And in the last movie, to give a spoiler alert, but James Bond doesn't make it back this time. So the F4 has officially outlasted the coolest secret agent the British establishment ever created, and it outlasted the imperial government of Iran. I'm sure there's probably 1,000 other things the F4 outlasted. It certainly outlasted my savings account, no thanks to HobbyMaster's enduring efforts, but that really goes to show you the level of capability this aircraft had over the years, and how much air combat has changed in 39 years, and how even though we've gone from beam riding missiles being the cutting edge of technology at this point in time, we've gone from this to here, right? 39 years difference, and in that time we've got nuclear powered aircraft carriers, stealth, radar and infrared suppression technologies, cyber warfare, drones, the F-35 fifth generation, sixth generation, that we're in sixth generation world now, and the F-4E is still flying. I mean, that's crazy. We've got squadrons in Japan and South Korea that are probably going to convert directly to the F-35 from the F-4, which has to be a amazingly difficult transition course to master, which is kind of like going from driving a 1965 or 1967 Shelby Mustang with a modern Ford 5.0 engine in it, going from that to driving a carbon fiber Ford GT. I mean, that's got to be just it's going to be an adjustment for those crews, I'm sure. And certainly a major adjustment for the maintainers. Can you imagine going from wrenching on something like this, where you have manual lines and hydraulic fittings and pressure test ports, and turn a wrench and see if it works, turn another wrench, and if it doesn't, going from that to a computer-based maintenance algorithm system where the airplane tells you what's broken before it happens. I mean, that's wow. More power to those maintainers. So those folks are going to be in school for a while. So as we close out Phantom May, I would like to ask a question of the viewers here. What kind of F4 models do you all have? I'm really curious, because I've got mostly U.S. Air Force ones in the mix, which is not a surprise because that's obviously the branch I served in. So if you're noticing a certain Air Force bias, it's not an accident. I'm sure if I joined the Navy instead, it'd be the other way around. But I'm curious to see what the breakdown is for some of y'all. Do you all collect like U.S. Air Force Phantoms, or like if you're in Greece and you're watching this, in which case thank you for your patronage, are you collecting like Greek Air Force Phantoms and like Turkish ones and various ones, or do you just stick to the one that's in your country? I'd like to know, just because I obviously know what my collection is, but that's just my list. I'd like to hear from the viewers out there what kind of Phantom collections you all have. Do you just collect everything that's just whatever strikes your fancy? Do you just collect service schemes, or do you just get the naval ones, the U.S. and the United Kingdom's naval Phantoms? Or let me know what you all have. I just like to hear from the comment section what you all have for your Phantom mixes and what your collections look like. So I really like to see what you all come back with. And as a channel update, I will make a note here that I did get a request from Patriot in the last video to do an SR-71 video. That's coming, so stay tuned. We will be looking at a Rapid Rabbit There's the hint for those of you who know your Century Wings models. So stay tuned for that. And there's going to be, of course, some other 1/72nd scale aircraft content coming in. So bear in mind that I do have some things coming up in the summer. So headed into June, I've got some things that might tie up my weekends, which means you might not see another video from me next week. I may upload the Sunday after that, or depending on the schedule of what I have going on, maybe the Sunday afterward. But if you don't see an upload for another week or another 2 weeks, don't call the National Guard and order a search party. I haven't forgotten about you guys, and I haven't disappeared. I just need to take care of some life change things happening here, and unfortunately it's going to take up some time during my weekends, which is usually when I have the opportunity to set everything up and do these videos for you folks out there. So with that, thank you for watching my video to this point. If you have not subscribed, consider subscribing. This way I will know that you approve of the videos that I'm doing, and it will put a notification in your YouTube page. So whenever I release a new video, you will automatically be notified that it's available for you to watch. And usually I try to get my videos published each Sunday. And like I said, the next couple of weeks that might be iffy based off of things going on, but keep an eye out for my next video. And if you like my content, consider checking out my model reviews that are on my channel. I've reviewed everything from MiGs to F-14s to F-4s, obviously like these, and all kinds of countries and nations and models in between. So odds are I probably got something in the collection that you would enjoy watching and getting some more insight on. So with that, we will wrap the video here. Thank you again for watching, and we will catch you in the next video.